Hello, everyone. I hope you're all happy and healthy, and I hope you all are doing well. Today, I'm going to talk about King Julien. King Julien, as we all know, is an incredible character, especially in All Hail King Julien, where Julien proved himself to be a great king. He cares about he cares about the people in his kingdom, and he cares about giving them the best lives possible. His character develops a lot throughout the series. He goes from believing that listening to other people's problems are boring in the first season to asking his people for suggestions on improving the kingdom in season 5, and that's just one example. He can be very impulsive and doesn't always do the right thing at first, but then he learns from his mistakes. I love how King Julien is so hilarious, how he seems to have unlimited energy sometimes. I love his charisma, his desire to have fun, his crazy shenanigans, his love of dancing, and of course, I love how he cares about his kingdom and his inner circle of friends. And in the movies, in the Madagascar movies, Julien still has good moments as a comic relief character. However, there is a bit of a problem with the way his character was written in the Penguins of Madagascar series. For those of you that don't know, The Penguins of Madagascar was a TV show that came out in 2008, so way before All Hail King Julien. But strangely, the final episode of The Penguins of Madagascar apparently aired in 2015, which was after All Hail King Julien that came out. Just thought I would mention that because it's kind of interesting. But anyways, the point is that in the Penguin series, King Julien, Maurice, and Mort were also there, living in the Central Park Zoo along with the penguins. Now, I absolutely love the penguins so much. The Penguin show so much. I actually like it a little bit more than All Hail King Julien, but I also love All Hail King Julien so much. There are really just a couple of reasons I like the Penguins of Madagascar more, but the biggest reason is because it features all of my favorite characters in one show. Yes, this is the show where we finally get to see the lemurs and the penguins interact, and I just love that idea so much because I just want to see more of the lemurs and the penguins and their dynamic with each other. However, there's just one problem with the Penguins of Madagascar, and it's Julien's character. The main problem with his character in this show is that they make him way too selfish. It's actually very disappointing how they portray it's actually very disappointing how they portrayed his character in the show, especially since I love the idea of Julien living at the zoo along with the penguins. Now, don't get me wrong, Julien does have some good moments in The Penguins of Madagascar. There are actually a couple of episodes where you get to see a little bit of Julien acting like his all hail King Julien self. For example, in the episode The Lost Treasure of the Golden Squirrel, Julien is the character that is revealed to be pure of heart. While all of the other characters are overcome with their own greed, Julien is the only one that is satisfied with what he has, which is essentially his kingdom at the zoo and Maurice and Mort. He is the only he is the only one that realizes that greed isn't the answer and ends up saving the day. I like how that episode kind of proves that Julien really isn't how the show usually likes to portray him. As a side note, I also found it quite interesting how even Julien expected himself to be the greediest of them all in that episode. I think that shows that Julien maybe doesn't want to act the way he does in the Penguin show, but rather he feels like that's just who he is and has the false belief that he can't do anything to change. Anyways, there's also the episode The Terror of Madagascar. At first, Julien is scared of the new baby Fusa because it keeps biting him. However, when he learns that the Fusa is only biting him because he sees Julien as a father figure, that's when he goes out of his way to protect the baby Fusa from Savio the snake. Julien even offers himself to be eaten first, thinking that the snake won't be able to eat the Fusa after eating him. That right there is so reminiscent of how Julien and All Hail King Julien would do anything to protect his people. Then there are a few episodes where Julien isn't exactly like his All Hail King Julien self, but he also isn't acting super selfishly or acting like a nuisance. He's just kind of there. Examples of that, in my opinion, are Rockabye Birdie, Whispers and Coos, Operation Antarctica, Trouble with Jiggles, The Red Squirrel, as well as a few others. In those episodes, I feel like Julien's character isn't at his best, but he also isn't misbehaving so much and can be quite funny. However, a good bit of the Penguins of Madagascar episodes feature Julien being way too selfish, acting like a nuisance, constantly getting in the way, being inconsiderate, and at his very worst moments in the show, he actually acts a little bit like a jerk. And I'm actually very disappointed to have to say that, but it's true. They really did not have to do this to his character. That is why I'm going to discuss how his character could have been improved in the Penguins of Madagascar series. So, the first thing, The easiest way for Julian's character to be better is to just have him be his All Hail King Julian self in the Penguin series. Have Julian be the character that All Hail King Julian proved that he is. Yes, Julian had flaws and had moments of selfishness in All Hail King Julian too, but at least we saw him improve as a character and as a leader. We saw his empathetic side as he said that he would give up his own life to save his kingdom, and we see how he would do anything to protect his people throughout that show. So bringing that version of Julien into the Penguins of Madagascar series would have fixed every issue with his character in the show. So the second thing is that Julien's character could have been improved on the Penguin show it could have been improved by simply changing the conflict between the lemurs and the penguins. So there is a summary of the show which describes Julien as an unwelcome challenge to the penguins' dominance at the zoo. What if that refers to the fact that the penguins are the main problem solvers at the zoo, and then all of a sudden King Julien comes along, and rather than making him this selfish, narcissistic, self-proclaimed king that doesn't care too often about anyone but himself, rather than that, what if they decided to have Julien actually be a character that truly wants to help others and tries to use his previous legit experience as king to solve the various problems that happen within the zoo? And then, because the penguins and Julien have very different philosophies as to how problems should be solved, that could be where the main conflict between the lemurs and the penguins comes from. Because if you've watched the Penguin series, you'll see that a lot of the episodes feature, like, this disagreement between the penguins and the lemurs, like, Julien annoying the penguins and causing problems for them and things like that. However, I think that what I was talking about here is a much better way to produce conflict between these two groups of characters than just simply ruining and exaggerating Julien's character. Julien has a very unorthodox way of leadership. Yes, Julien does need Maurice to stop him from implementing some of his extremely wild ideas, but a lot of the time his unusual style of leadership does prove to work. For example, in the first episode of season 5 of All Hail King Julien actually pretends to be dead in order to bring his people together and stop all of the chaos. Of course, it sounds very ridiculous, and Maurice certainly didn't like that idea, but you have to admit that it did work and it did solve the problem. In addition to some of his ideas for improving the kingdom being very outside of the box, Julien also prefers to do things in a fun way if it is possible to do so. Meanwhile, Skipper has a more practical and orderly way of leadership. He has years of training and he is very strict about sticking to that. While he does act on instinct when necessary, Skipper seems to have very little tolerance for doing anything that is super outside of the box. These differences, as well as the other differences that they have, should have been the main reason why there is so much conflict between the penguins and the lemurs. Instead of having Julien be so selfish, they should have made Julien want to help and contribute to making the zoo a better place just as much as Skipper wants to, but then Skipper and the other penguins try to stop him, forcing Julien to go against their wishes so he can help out. And maybe sometimes his solutions to help the situation or to help another zoo animal backfires, and then that could also cause more conflict between the penguins and the lemurs, where the penguins use the time where Julien's ideas don't work as an excuse to say that he has no idea of how to be a leader or solve situations, which would really hurt Julien because Julien truly does care about being a good leader and helping those around him. And again, All Hail King Julien proves this is true. This idea gives the show a way to make the conflict between the two groups make sense without making Julien the bad guy. And in order to start resolving this conflict, there could be some moments where both Julien and Skipper realize that sometimes a different approach to doing things is necessary. Throughout the series, the lemurs and the penguins can learn to see each other's point of view and have more respect for each other's unique strengths when it comes to leadership, allowing the two to team up in order to keep the zoo happy and safe. Another way to improve Julien's character in this series is to have him be really selfish and flawed in the beginning, but have there be an actual reason why he acts that way. Have Julien have to make Julien eventually confront that reason, and then have him eventually change and become a better character as the show goes on. Let's think of some reasons why Julian might act the way that he does on the Penguin show. While I wish he wasn't portrayed that way, in some ways, Julian being more selfish in the Penguin show makes a little bit of sense. In All Hail King Julian, he had a real kingdom to look out for. And I think protecting his people was the only way that he was able to stop being so selfish and irresponsible. He started to really care about taking care of his people, and he saw them as his family. Being a good king to his people was practically his purpose in life. However, at the zoo, he doesn't have a real kingdom, just a pretend one. And because of that, Julian has nothing greater than himself to care about. So perhaps that's why he starts acting selfishly on the Penguin show. I think that being king was his purpose, and without having that purpose and meaning in his life at the zoo, he is lost and he tries to find fulfillment and happiness through being selfish and being self-indulgent, but it obviously doesn't work and it just leaves him dis- he just leaves him disliked by everyone at the zoo. Also, in my opinion, it leaves him even more unhappy, which is why I think he just doubles down on being obnoxious and selfish because he's just so lost and doesn't know what to do with himself now that he isn't king anymore. And I believe the way he behaves because of that in this series also ruins his relationship with Maurice. Speaking of Maurice, in All Hail King Julien, Maurice is much more firm with Julien and will stop Julien when he is doing something wrong. But in the Penguin show, most of the time, Maurice just enables Julien's bad behavior. I think that's another reason why Julien acts the way he does in that show, as it is very clear that he needs Maurice to be his advisor and to stop him from going too far. But there could be another reason that Julian could be more selfish and problematic on the Penguin show that I want to discuss in more detail. And that reason is that, well, what if Julian is being so selfish as a way to protect himself? What if the fact that his parents um, abandoning him caused him to believe that no one else but himself will ever love him, so he has to love himself even more to make up for that? What if he always has to be the center of attention because he's trying to make up for the love that he didn't get from his parents? What if he is just having a hard time distinguishing between self-love and selfishness? What if he hates the idea of being selfless at first because he sees being selfless as as basically meaning that he's worthless or that he doesn't matter? What if perhaps Julian doesn't want to be selfish and wants to be that selfless person and that kind of leader that would sacrifice himself to save others, but he's very pain avoidant and struggles with bravery? What I'm getting at here is that it would have been super interesting to see an emotional side to why he's selfish. Even if we didn't quite agree with his actions, seeing the emotion or knowing the story as to why he acts the way he does would have helped the audience to have more sympathy for him. It could have been anything from him being selfish and self indulgent as a way to feel love, to him wanting to be selfless but doesn't see how he can do that without neglecting himself, to just simply not understanding the difference between selfishness and self love. Just anything that was emotional, anything that would have allowed us to see this internal battle going on within Julian, where maybe he wants to change, maybe he doesn't want to change, but at the same time he does want to change. Like maybe it's just like one moment he does want to be better, and then the next moment he can't help himself. He wants to go back to his old ways. And it also would be interesting if we see that Julian has a very strong belief in individualism and self preservation, but that clashes with his dream of being an amazing king and leader. Because obviously, if you want to be a king or if you want to be a leader, you have to be thinking about other people first and not necessarily being so individualistic. Okay. And then, in order for him to change, you can have something happen or have someone who can make it crystal clear to Julian that he cannot continue to be the same way, that maybe he's been wrong about some things, and then he tries and struggles to be better. And eventually, he then manages to become the amazing character and king that we all know that Julian is. Skipper could have been the one that makes him realize the error of his ways and almost become a mentor to Julian by teaching him leadership skills, or if Maurice would have been the true friend that Julian needs him to be and stops him from when he is doing something wrong, then that could help Julian to begin to have a change of heart as well. And also, I do think that this whole thing, I think especially the idea with Skipper being the one to help Julian recognize, like, that he should change and that he shouldn't be acting the way that he acts. I feel like that, like, Skipper and Julian, I think Skipper is much more of a, like, he's very much a person that will sacrifice his life for others, right? and then Julian is more individualistic and selfish, right? Skipper is all about teamwork and, and being a team player, and Julian just wants to he just wants to, have everything be about him. And so I think that, like, the fact that you have these two characters that have these very, like, almost like opposite different, like, these completely opposite personal beliefs from each other, like the selfless versus the selfish, like the selfless versus the selfish. Sorry, that's a little bit of a tongue twister. But yeah, but just having that, that difference in these two characters is just also really interesting. And and if there was a good reason for Julian being selfish, like, Julian tried to explain to Skipper, like, why he takes that position of being more individualistic and trying to really only look out for himself. And then maybe if the two would explain things to each other, maybe they could see that, like maybe they could just, I don't know. Like, this is a little bit off topic, but I just kind of wanted to mention that really quickly. Okay, and finally, the last thing is that the writers could just simply focus on his fun and playful side within this series. So, like I said, lastly, if DreamWorks doesn't like any of those other options, they could have simply focused on Julian's fun and playful side. Let him just be the fun and music loving character, and give the role of the penguin's annoying neighbor to another character. Seriously, since Julian isn't the the main character in this series, or at least he's not, like, I mean, he's kind of a main character a little bit, but like the penguins are the real main characters. So anyway, since this series is not all about Julian, it's about the penguins, so they don't even have to give Julian so much depth here. Like, they could just simply make him fun, just make him love music, just make him very quirky and eccentric. And in some ways, the show did do that, but then they also added the extreme selfishness to his character. Again, DreamWorks, you didn't have to go out of your way to make Julian extra selfish and unlikable for no reason. Just make him the fun, quirky, music loving character. That's it. That's all you had to do, DreamWorks. That's all you had to do. DreamWorks, take notes on this video if you are ever going to make a reboot of this show. King Julien is one of my favorite characters of all time, and he is one of my top 2 favorite characters in the whole Madagascar franchise. King Julien is the best king in the world. He always wants the best for his kingdom. He wants his people to have the best life possible, to have fun, and to be happy. And he would do anything, even sacrifice himself, in order to save his people. Despite being a fictional character, he is one of my biggest inspirations. He makes a lot of mistakes despite having good intentions, but that is part of why I appreciate that is part of what I appreciate about him. That is part of what I appreciate about him, because I can relate to that. I also appreciate that when he does mess up, he tries to make things right, proving that it's never too late to do the right thing. And of course, I love how funny he can be, and I love how he's very opinionated and he does things in his own unique and eccentric way. And I also love how he still manages to be happy despite having neglectful parents, an awful uncle, and countless enemies. Julien is everything I wish I could be: confident, fun, kind, playful, opinionated, sassy, charismatic, a good leader, brave, and someone who loves themselves but loves the people around him even more. All Hail King Julien was truly when Julien was at his best. I'm just sad that DreamWorks didn't show how great Julien's character was in the Penguin show. So anyways, that's it for this video. Let me know what your thoughts on this topic. What do you think of Julien in the Penguins Madagascar TV show? Do you like his character in the Penguin show? Do you prefer his character in All Hail King Julien, or do you actually prefer his character here? Like, that would be interesting if you do prefer his character in the Penguin show over All Hail King Julien. Like, that would be very interesting. Like I said, he does have good moments in that series as well. But again, a lot of the good parts about him is very much overshadowed in this series, because I think that this series tried to amplify a lot of his weaknesses in this series. And yeah, like I said, I think his character could have been done better. But hey, if you have a different opinion, if you think his character was perfect in this series, then that is a-okay. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your ideas are for improving his character in this series would be, or, you know, let me know, like, why do you think he acts the way that he does in the Penguin series? Like, do you think there's a reason? Let me know all of your thoughts related to this topic in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to love yourself and be kind to everyone. Bye.